I see a lot of people complaining about the algorithm and not being able to get good engagement. How do you think these people would handle being stuck in Togo, Africa without Wi-Fi or water for 3 days?
It's- yeah, that one was tough. Yeah, if they can't deal with the algorithm change, then they definitely shouldn't be traveling to Africa. But yeah, wow, you did your research, man. I'm really impressed. Yeah, that happened during COVID too, so it was interesting. Um, we had no idea what was going on. There was people on the plane in like painter suits and gas masks, and yeah, we got sent home from Liberia, and we were flying to the Accra Ghana airport, and all of a sudden the pilot comes on. And he's like, "Yeah, we're being diverted to another airport," and essentially I'd never heard of Lomé, Togo when we landed there, and pretty much were held by customs, I think, for like 16 hours or something. They separated us, and we didn't have visas, and it was this whole mess. And then, like, meanwhile, like the company, I own part of the company, so no one at home knew what happened to us, and like my family and everything, our families, like we were off the blip. So yeah, it was interesting, man. COVID was a great start.
That's crazy, dude. I can't imagine. My mom would have been freaking out if I just disappeared while I was traveling to Africa. That's insane. But you're from New Jersey. I'm actually from New York. My family lives in Connecticut now, so we got that East Coast thing going on. You were a high school dropout and a janitor. This is part of the story that you tell so beautifully, and it's part of your brand. You went back to school as an electrician and you became a substation superintendent. I had to look up what a substation was, but it's those big like generators in between all the power lines and everything. And as a superintendent, I heard you say that communication was the biggest key to success, communicating with your team. Can you relate like the way that you had to communicate and lead your team with the way that you're approaching your brand as a communicator and a leader?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, Greg. And it was funny. I started writing about electricity and was trying to like leverage that title. And like I talked to a friend of mine. He's like, I have no idea what that is. So like, obviously it was a problem. But yeah, as far as that, like it's dangerous work. Well, we worked with high voltage, built high voltage systems, power lines, and everything like that. And basically, there'd be a lot of issues. Like if something bad happened, it would end in catastrophic failure. Like like transformers are filled with oil, and if there's an arc flash, it's literally like an explosive bomb. And so what I had to learn, and especially with like electricians or linemen, like a lot of those guys didn't finish high school, and they're not the most educated of people. And so if you didn't communicate clear enough, a things could explode. B, thousands of people could lose power, or worse, someone that you care about, that you work with every day, could get hurt or die. And so I had to learn very concise and deliberate, um, yeah, communication skills, and I try to transfer that in my writing. Kieran Drew, I think you've had him on here. He's a great friend of mine. You see a lot of people say like, "Be clear and not clever," and always like, dude, I used to work at Dairy Queen, and yeah, if you're from New York, you know how people are like. I worked at Dairy Queen, and I learned the hard way that like if I didn't say what somebody ordered back to them, like they were just super rude, and I'd screw up, and it'd be a bad day, right? And so like that's what it's just like. I try to reread my content and be like, okay, is the message clear? Like, is somebody gonna walk away from this a better person, or feel like, hey, oh, every time I read his stuff, I learn, right? Like something gets better. And it took me a while to transfer that into writing, but yeah, basically, if you can make it as simple as possible, like for my hooks, I've got a lot of friends that I bounce our hooks from, and we edit it, and it's just like, if there's a tough word in there that adds friction, people aren't going to read it. Like one of my buddies sent it to me, and I think the word was vanity, and I was just like, dude, this is a great hook, but vanity is just going to stop me when I read it, right? And so it's like being able to communicate like emotionally through stories and tap into emotions, but also make it so easy to digest that people can just kind of shred through it and walk away feeling better that they engaged with your content.
Yeah, it's interesting because there really are like a lot of skill transferring that goes down when you go from the 9 to 5 world or just the traditional work space into kind of being an online communicator. It's like it pulls from so many places, and that's what creates somebody's personal brand. And for you, you had almost these dreams of being like an electricity influencer almost at first, right? And I went back and I looked at your first tweet, and it was, "Why should you care about electricity? Linemen, electricians, and many other tradesmen have died and are dying for it to be provided to you. So that's kind of what you just said, but no one really engaged with it. It wasn't something that people were necessarily looking for. So you had a podcast, the Shock Center podcast, that but it wasn't really catching on, right? And so, how did you deal with the market kind of telling you that they weren't really interested in that type of content?
Yeah, I mean that's what's cool about the internet and Twitter, and that's kind of why I fell in love with or X. I'm sorry. I hope the algorithm doesn't like hear this and hate me for saying that, but yeah, it's great. Like I mean, it was a huge failure on my part. I invested a lot of time and money, thinking that like yeah, people would love to just turn on their radio and listen to stuff about electricity. But what's great about X and like the market is like the instant verification of an idea, right? Like Mark Manson or Ryan Holiday, those big authors, like they start an idea with a tweet, right? And if the tweet does well, it turns into a thread, it turns into a blog post, and sometimes even a book. And so like that ability to get your idea instantly verified by, the internet, by hundreds of millions of people so fast, I think it's incredible. And so like, after 3 months of trying to write about it and do all that, it's like, okay, it's not there. And like in hindsight, I'm grateful I had that experience instead of like spending like years of my life trying to get people to like be intrigued by electricity. Like I love the book Cash Advertising, and he talks about the life force eight. It's like the eight primary human desires, like food, water, shelter, comfortable living conditions, companionship, having a tribe, and all this stuff. And then he's like, okay, so if your product or your services don't hit that, like here's the secondary desires, which are learned, which is like, status, money. And he's like, and if your products or services don't tap any of those, it's not going to work, right? And so it's like, okay, like I'm not providing people pleasure or taking away a pain, so like it's not gonna fucking work, right? Sorry if I curse on here, dude, but yeah. So like I think it's a great thing for anybody just to log on and like start writing and talking to people, and like if your idea fails, you can just pivot until something works. Like it's beautiful that quick verification. I mean, I don't know, in the 80s or 90s, like someone wanted to start a business and it might just fail and fail and fail, and they don't know why. Like, you'd have to send a snail mail to somebody and do your cold outreach and stuff like that. And just the ability for things to happen so fast. I think it's incredible.
Yeah, you talked about pivoting, and that's, I had to go through that, and it's a process. I know that you read Mastery by Robert Greene, and he talks about kind of, realizing what you really passionate about and what you lose yourself in. And you remembered kind of, you used to sit and write stories as a kid, these like imaginary stories, and you kind of rediscovered this passion for storytelling. That reminds me a lot of me with social audio. It doesn't go all the way back to when I was a child, but I built an audio dating app like 6 years ago, and I just was in love with this form of communication on the internet. And then I went through all these other phases, and I realized, hey, I still love this, and this is what I want to create around. And that's really been a big breakthrough for me. What are some ways that creators can really find what they want to talk about? Because that's a huge problem for people that are just starting out.
Yeah, yeah, it's a huge problem for people. So when I found mine, there was a couple things that happened. Like I would tell my friends, and it's usually like right under your nose. Like I would tell my friends, hey, I'm starting a podcast about electricity. You want to check it out? And they're like, no, I don't care about electricity. I just want to hear your crazy stories because I used to work in like war zones and all this stuff, and I'd get into like all types of trouble and shenanigans, and it's just good bar stories. And they're like, yeah, I would rather hear that in the car radio. So like that was one tip. It's like, what are people telling you? Or like, what are people reaching out to you and asking you for? Like, are they asking you for investing advice? Like, if you're into crypto or something, or people are like, yo, what's up with this coin? Like, cause like you'll get those signals, but you just don't like consciously realize it. Like people do think you're better at certain things than you give yourself credit for. But I did this cool exercise that I saw on the internet somewhere, and it was like, ask 5 to 10 family members or friends and tell them, like, hey, I'm in a business class. What are 3 things that you think I'm good at? And see what overlaps. And like everyone I asked said storytelling, right? And so it was like, okay, okay. And it was kind of just this like, I was reading Mastery at the same time, and this conglomerate of like the world telling me what it is. So I think it's like kind of like not trying to force it, but just like you said, dude, your audio, I think it's like so creatively awesome and genius, like that path. And it's a really important concept, and like a lot of people miss it. And yeah, it's a great idea, and I think it's like people need to listen more, right? Like audio is great, and it forces you to listen. Like I'm trying to learn Portuguese, and I listen to Portuguese music so I can hear like Portuguese rap, just so I can hear the pronunciation. And like try to take a day like without your phone or something, and just like listen to what your friends or family are telling you. Like go through your messages and like see what people ask you for help for, and see where like you see overlapping and consistency with those messages. So it's kind of a lot, but it's there.
No, I think that's really tactical advice. I remember Gary Vaynerchuk talking about that when he was really preaching self awareness a few years ago, and I was deep in his content. And people were like, "How do I become more self aware?" And he's like, "It's really hard. The only thing I can think of is go to people in your inner circle and your family and your friends and ask them, like, what am I good at? What am I bad at? You're not going to hurt my feelings." Building that trust so that people can tell you who you are, because sometimes it's hard to see that for yourself, you know. And you mentioned kind of like working in these war zones and everything. I know you were all over the world as an electrician, you know, in Liberia, the Ivory Coast, and Indonesia, and Uzbekistan. And you don't, you said, you know, there's not a lot of hardware stores there where you had to like MacGyver a lot of things in order to get things done to bring all of these substations together. How would you compare, if you can, kind of the early days of content creation and just trying to figure out what you're doing with not a lot of tools at your disposal because you're new, to like being in the middle of nowhere and trying to make it happen?
Yeah, yeah, dude. It's just like I mean, and like you're an entrepreneur. It's like you kind of have to be crazy enough to fail so much, but just know that like there is something on the other side. Like I don't know, yeah, like when I would be in Africa, like Uzbekistan, when you needed to get wire and stuff, and it wasn't available or whatever. Like you just look around and see what you have. And there's this really cool part of Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans that kind of taught me this, like the resourcefulness. There's some director. I wish I knew his name. He's like a famous director, and he does these low budget films, and he gets like the high end celebrities to do it. And he literally got famous because he would just make movies out of what he had in his apartment. And then like the next movie, like he's like, yeah, my brother's got a pet turtle. So like we wrote the story around like this pet turtle, and like I think we have just so much around us that's available, and we don't realize it. Like I get very tunnel vision, especially with like social media, your cell phone grabbing your attention. But yeah, like you'd kind of be forced in this situation where like, okay, I have to be resourceful, and what do I have? And to transfer that to content creation, like, dude, yeah, like I said, I sucked, and I kept trying with electricity, and it was like, okay, what do I have now? Like, and luckily with Twitter, you can make a lot of friends, and like I had friends, and like I would get on one-on-ones with people, talk to them, what's working for them, what's not working, right? And like, I mean, when you comment, it's like it's networking, it's a network, and like you have a little advertisement with your face there, and you talk to enough people and you're consistent. Like I think I was on for 6 months and I could barely get over 100 followers, and there was a large account that was like, all right, dude, I've seen you hustling enough. You've commented on my stuff every day for 6 months. He's like, let's get on a call, right? And so it's like just being crazy enough to know that like if you keep trying, you're going to break through, and then just knowing what you have available. Like instead of saying, oh, I don't have this, I don't know how to write, I don't know how to grow, I don't know how the algorithm works. Like think about what you do have, which is like, yeah, friends or like whatever skill, and try to apply that. But a lot of it comes to self awareness, like you were saying.
Yeah, and the other thing you have is time, right? And it's like I see a lot, you know, with my clients, they want to rush. They want to rush the growth. They want to rush the what's my offer? How do I make money? And it's like you have to commit yourself to the process. As trite as that is, it's the truth. Like there's a reason that that's cliche. But one of the things I also tell them to do is to really look at the long form tweets right now. I feel like are doing really well, and it's a way to grow because people really engage with it, and it gets pushed really easily on the timeline. And you build a deep connection with people if you're able to tell good stories through those long tweets. It's kind of the perfect format for that. Personal stories, business stories, particularly failures and vulnerabilities. That obviously falls right in your wheelhouse. So I'm curious, how are you seeing long tweets perform? Are you playing around with those?
Yeah, I've been playing around with them a lot. Like last month, obviously, as you've seen, a lot of things have changed. I'm very bullish on the direction that X is going. But yeah, like last month, I would have threads, and I would put video in the threads, and there was like a little hack for like the more time someone spent on your thread, the more visibility it got. Like, so if they retweeted, it would get a boost. So I just would repost all my best writing threads and put a video on it. And I'm still experimenting with that, but they're not doing nearly as well. Yeah, in the long form, like it doesn't necessarily get as much engagement, but it does gain me more followers. And so like I've experimented with just writing or just a picture, but what I find best is having a video, like and having them like, okay, read the long form content and then like sit on the video and watch it. And that's what I love about like the storytelling exercise that I do is like I'll go through my Google Photos and videos and I'll just like every photo is a memory, right? There's a story behind it. And like you can just write, it's like limitless inspiration. Like people always say, I don't know what to write about. It's like either go through your photos or like go through your mom and dad's photo albums if they have them. And like every single thing there is a memory and there's a lesson you could pull out of it, right? Like I had an email, I found a picture of my dog that died like 10 years ago, and it's like he was a giant Irish wolfhound, right? And it was like, okay, this is how you tell an emotional story. So like as long as you can have a lesson from like that video or something, like it's going to be beneficial as long as you're teaching them something. So I think like I'm really bullish on like yeah, having your long form story and then just having videos that you save. Like I don't know, if you go for a walk and you give a bum $1 or something and throw a life lesson out there, like people like that stuff. So I'm pretty bullish on that.
Yeah, I hope you guys are listening. This is really tactical to go through your camera roll or old photo albums and find a picture, any picture, and that should bring up a ton of story ideas. And not only does it bring you the story idea, but then you have the media to support it by default, right? And so it creates this really dynamic effect. Imagine when you're scrolling your timeline and you see, that old picture of the childhood thing, and then there's a story. It's like you automatically are drawn to that to check it out. So you're kind of reverse engineering it instead of thinking what's the story and then go searching for the picture. Look through the pictures, you get the ideas and you have the media right there. So I love that. It's brilliant. And I want to pull a little bit on what you talked about in your threads having video attached to it. You've done it not just in a way where you're like, well, I guess I want to ask you why you did it, because the way I saw it was maybe to have a stronger call to action. So you have these threads that go viral quite often. You're a very good thread writer. And then as your last tweet, you have a video of you just kind of standing in your room being like, hey guys, thanks so much for reading the thread. These take a long time. If you really enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a follow or a retweet, whatever. So are you saying that you use those because you want to increase the watch time in the thread? Or have you also seen those kind of been converting well into followers or whatever?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Like now, I feel like with the AI generated content world, the more personal you can be, whether it's in your email, like you see Kieran Drew with a picture of himself in the bottom of the email, like if you can make it as personal as possible, so that that person like on the screen feels like they're directly there with you. Like it's like I feel like that's the best way to convert like a follower into a fan, right? And so originally I did do it for that purpose to hold people on there, but then I realized like no one else, like all the call to actions were the same, right? Like if you like this, retweet. Number two, give me a follow. And like I just like that it added the personal touch and it got a ton of engagement. And so like also like I'll start with like a thank you, like hey, I just want to let you know I'm grateful you made it here. And so like I don't know how often people get that on social media, like a direct like hey, thank you, right? And it's nice. And then I was watching this thing about Mr. Beast and like why his videos are so successful. And like one of the aspects he does is like he puts so much time, like you can see how much time and value and effort he puts into it. So like just simply saying like I put a lot of value into this or like a lot of time into this, there's like a psychological like trick that makes people just want to engage with it more. Because I think Mr. Beast had something like he like cut like a tree or like a log branch with a hacksaw. And he like videotaped himself doing it for like 20 hours and it got a ton of engagement. Like if people see the actual time and effort put into it. So I think that like videotaping myself and being like, hey, the writing takes a lot of time, the editing, the copy, now having videos, like it just takes a ton of time. So if you wouldn't mind doing this, and then I just like to leave them off on a high note, like enjoy your weekend, have a good day. And I don't think anyone else is doing it. So like not only does it add a personal touch, but it just kind of makes it more human and hopefully I mean they get a lot of good engagement. So I think like people just leave on a higher note as opposed to just like watching kitten videos or something like that.
I think it works well, like, because if you're maybe someone who's not as much that doesn't identify as a creator, they're more of a consumer. Maybe I think it's really a personal touch. It's a nice touch. It is for everybody, but then particularly with the creators, I'm looking at that and being like, oh, this is really innovative and cool, and nobody's trying this and doing it. So there's like a level of respect increase as well for the experimentation, and it's cool to hear that it's working. quite well for you on a couple different fronts. And you mentioned the Mr. Beast thing. It just made me think of like that's the way he came up, was doing like absurdly long videos. Like I remember he did one when he was a nobody and he like said Logan Paul 100,000 times in a row. It took him like 8 hours and it's still on YouTube. And he would just do these like crazy long things. And you just kind of like, all right, I respect that. And you subscribe. Right. So, and now, of course, he's way beyond that, but there is something to just, okay, this guy put in the work, you know what I mean, to make it. So all of that is really cool, man. And you also put a lot of work into this course that you just put out about 6 weeks ago, the story system. It did very well. I'm curious, what did you learn through that process? And would you do anything differently for the next time you launch a course?
Yeah, yeah, I would do a lot. I did a lot of things wrong. I mean, in hindsight, it was, yeah, a great success. And like for anyone listening to this, like I'd never built or launched a digital product before, and like the best thing is, is just like getting in and doing it. Like I was like, screw it, dude. I'm just gonna build a product and launch it and see how it goes. And I think that's like I said, like my friend Kieran, like he did that in the beginning. Like his first product didn't do as well, and now he's doing like multiple six-figure launches every 3 months. And that's because like he just went in and failed and learned from it. And so like the best way to do it is like, I mean, just getting in there. Like if you are trying to monetize or whatever, like just go do it. I mean, just try to launch a product, even if you don't know what you're doing, and you're going to learn so much more than like, I don't know. At least for me, I learned so much about digital marketing from that experience than I probably would on any course or anything like that. So yeah, I'm just a big fan of like getting in there and like messing up and making mistakes, and then I don't know. Like people love seeing that online. Like I had a lot of friends like cheering me on that were my first followers, and they're like, "Dude, that's so cool that you're doing this. Like even if it doesn't work out, like I got respect for you for like sharing it in public." And so like yeah, just do it. Like set an audacious goal and share it and tell everybody. Like I was like, yeah, I'm gonna quit my job and move to Brazil. Like hopefully I can make some more money by December. And like people love that journey and they live vicariously through you. But yeah, a few things I would have done differently is like obviously sell the product before you build it. Like I have a lot of friends that like will have a wait list and sell it and promote it for 3 months, and I just kind of like nerfed it in about like I think a month and a half or 2 months. Like I just built it, studied the audience and beta tested it and made sure it was good. I would have closed the doors. Like everyone told me, like I don't know. Sometimes you get like tunnel vision. Like I said, like all of my friends were like, "Yeah, open and close the doors." And I left it open just because like I put so much work into it, right? Like I wanted to have that digital dream of waking up and seeing sales every day, which happened, but then it obviously dies off, right? And so I was like, oh man, I should have just closed the doors and take it out of Notion and put it in Kajabi or Thrivecart and have professional video and then sell it for double and relaunch it, right? But I didn't do that. And so like learning that lesson of like the importance of the open and close and kind of like invoking the fear of missing out. So those are some lessons I learned.
Yeah, Kieran did that to an extent, at least with the closing the doors, and then he added a little bit and relaunched it a couple of months later, as you said, and it did, I think, even better this time. So because it's a good product, once you close the doors, it starts to get around in the market. Oh, this changed my life. This is great, and everyone's like, "Where can I get it?" Oh, it's not available, and then all of a sudden, it's like, "Well, we're going to relaunch it, so keep on the lookout." And you build that next waitlist, and you can double or even triple launch the same product with a couple add-ons, but most of the work's already done. So it's a good idea. And you mentioned, how you live in Brazil now. And I know that you're a fan of Tim Ferriss and Mark Manson, who you've already mentioned today. They both went from the US to South America to become online writers, similar to you. How do you think that creators, I mean, do you think they should find people to kind of emulate and look at that are building online, if that's what they intend to do, and have someone to track their footsteps in a way?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a quote I live by and I tell people, and it's like, whatever your goal is, has someone done it before? And if they have, then it means it's very likely you can do it too, right? And so, like, I don't like to read books. Like, I used to just read every book I could find, but I like to read authors who have done things that I want to do. And like in there you always find tidbits of great stories and all this stuff. And yeah, I'll never forget picking up like the 4 hour work week, and he talks about this guy who was a lawyer who actually moved to Rio. He went to Rio on vacation and like went off this paragliding cliff jump and just had like an epiphany. He's like, yeah, I'm just going to quit my lawyer job that pays me tons of money and I'm going to start a surfing company out in where I'm actually at now in Florianopolis. And so, yeah, last year I just did the same thing. Like I was like, screw it, I'll just relive the same story. I went to Rio and I went paragliding with a guy that doesn't speak English, and I was like scared to death because like it wasn't like, all right, ready, 1 2 3 go. It was like kind of like a slap on the butt and like, let's start running, and went off this cliff, and I was like I was like limp, like, you know, you're supposed to lay like Superman, like I was just like dangling and limp. I couldn't believe it, and then like I came to, and the whole trip, like, I mean, it was gorgeous, but I just couldn't stop thinking like, dude, like that was more dangerous than starting an online business. I was like, I don't know what I'm afraid of, right? And it was just a really pivotal moment since then.
That's crazy. You talked about like, traveling a lot as well. When you were an electrician, we talked about, and that you spent more time in hotels than you did at home. And I'm wondering now, as a creator, like, do you still travel a lot and do a lot of things like that? Or are you kind of more just happy with some of the time freedom you have and like local flexibility? Are you traveling, or how do you spend your time?
Yeah, I travel. I like to travel a lot. Like I've spent the past 10 years traveling, and I get weird if I'm in the same place, but for too long. But I'm almost 30. I'll be 30 in November, and like I don't know, my priorities are starting to slowly shift. Like you mentioned, Mark Manson's one of my favorite authors, and he wrote like, you know what happens after you, like he's like, everyone's goal is to like travel the world. Everyone wants to travel the world, but no one talks about what happens after. And he's like, after your 40th or 41st country, it's all the same. Like you don't get the culture shock. It's another one of these deals. And he's like, what do you do after that? You have to build, right? And so I'm kind of like nearing that point. Like I don't get the rush of like being somewhere new as much, and I find myself comparing a lot of things. I'm like, oh, these mountains aren't as big as these mountains, and oh, this beach was nicer than this beach, and like subconsciously doing it, like, and yeah, I think like next year I've been doing some reflection. I'd like to stay posted somewhere, get a professional setup. Like I got this, I literally have the laptop on like 2 suitcases right now. Like get a microphone and just grind, right, and build a family, you know, have a house or something like that. So just I think for the next decade, it's something I'll transition to is just staying in the same place.
Interesting. Yeah. And you said you're kind of like learning Portuguese as well. So it's almost like the internal journey. Now you've done a lot of the external traveling and now you got to travel internally. Like how great can I be? Even if I just sit in a house, what can I feed myself and learn? And I think X is an amazing place for that as well. Like the people on there, the ideas on there, the way that, we put out stuff and it gives us instant feedback that we have to iterate and be better. And I know that you've also expressed interest in writing a book. And I'm wondering if you have, is there a timeline on that? What might it be about? And like, what kind of challenges do you see with that?
Yeah, I definitely want to build the online business first. And I don't know, people have just always, it's kind of like the thing I told you about, like the niche, like there's always something under your nose, right? And like people tell me that just because of the crazy stories, but like, I don't know. I definitely want to build the business first. And then like, I don't know how I would like spin it. So it's interesting. Like just like here's a, like confessions of an asshole world traveler or something like that, like like I don't know, like I like Manson's spin on things where it's like he's going against the status quo of the self-improvement world and tells his stories. So I don't know, I'd have to do some deep thinking about it, and I know books take a ton of time. I wouldn't even know where to start, but that's definitely like a next in the next decade or something like that, when I can meet some cool writer buddies online and find out all the ins and outs of that business. So
Yeah, I think like everything else, it'll make itself obvious when it's time to start doing that. And right now you're locked into your business and you're doing great. It's awesome to see. I have a question about the tattoos. So I have about like 8 or 10 tattoos, but I haven't gotten any in the last like 5 years and I'm itching. And I'm trying to figure out what I want. I have some ideas. What's the process for you? How often are you getting inked? And what's your process to like figure out what you want? Does it just come to you and you write it down? Are you picking out of books? Like, is it a mixture of everything?
yeah, so it's interesting. I haven't gotten that many lately. I've like slowed down on it. I don't know if it's because I'm getting old or whatnot, or like I'm running out of space. But yeah, I actually, so like what I'll do is I would go on Instagram and I'd find an artist that I like, and the one guy I see is from Philadelphia, and the other guy is from Buffalo, New York, so they're not too far from you. But yeah, I would just find their stuff on Instagram, and every tattoo artist, like if you like their stuff, like the artwork they're putting out, and like they're so creative, it's like if you do tell them to draw something, it's going to turn out way better than you like. Obviously, you've done a ton of homework for this podcast. I'm impressed. So like, if you do your homework on an artist whose art you like and you tell them to draw something, it's going to be better than you usually imagine. But what I would do is I would just go to them for the first time and I would be like, hey, do you have your book? And every tattoo artist that's good has like a book of all these designs that they want to do. And the cool thing is like they never get to do them because they're constantly doing like custom stuff for people. And so like if you go in there and you're like, dude, I want to just do whatever you want to do. I always get like a flat rate, so like they charge me less, and then you get like brownie points because you're doing something they want to do. You're like, dude, I want to tattoo you more. Like, you're a cool guy, and you get stuff that I want to do, and then when they do stuff they want to do, they're more artistically expressive. Like, I don't know, they're like, what colors do you want? I'm like, I don't know. What looks good? What do you think's gonna look good? You're like, oh wow. And so like I know a lot of people don't shoot from the hip like that, but I just had stuff really turn out awesome because like they're doing something that they want to do, which is kind of weird because like you're getting a tattoo on yourself, but like the more empathetic and like less selfish you are, the better it turns out. I don't know. It might not work for everybody, but and I always end up becoming great friends with them and getting to hang out with them after and yeah, it's like I'm just buddies with them now.
I love that. Those are good tips, for real. I actually wasn't expecting that tactical. That's really smart, and, it kind of has a parallel to content, right? Where it's like you really have to the more empathy you have for the reader, the better that you are able to, like, construct something that's meaningful, even though it's your content, it's really for them, and I guess there's a light parallel there, so that's cool, man, and, listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I really admire you. I think what you're doing is amazing. The transition you've had, the way you tell your story, the quality of the content you put out, the way you present yourself, and your journey. I definitely want to be moving out of the states as well and have a more experiential lifestyle, which I think you've done an amazing job of. So I'd like to just have you share any lasting message for the audience, anything an encouragement or anywhere else you want to push them as far as your social media or other things, email list, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You did an awesome job. Like, thank you for hosting me here, and I appreciate you doing your homework and having awesome questions, man. It was a lot of fun, and I definitely hope we can keep in touch and help each other out. But I mean, the thing is, like, I was a janitor, I was an electrician. I am not the smartest guy in the world, and I think it just with a little bit of elbow grease and consistency, anyone can do anything. And like you said, with the with X and having a great network, like you can build a business, you can live where you want nowadays, and it's not going to take you a decade. Yeah, it's all possible there as long as you don't give up. And the biggest thing for me was having friends. Like, who's going to promote your products? Who's going to help you out? It's your friends. And the biggest reason my launch was successful is because I had a ton of friends help me out. I believe goodwill compounds. There's a lot of transactional people out there. I try to help out and just do whatever I can for people. And I don't know, it really returns itself for the product launch. So just keep that in mind. Like, if you're struggling to grow, make some friends, get some homies, like talk to each other, get on spaces and work together, and you'll succeed really quickly. But yeah, otherwise you can find my newsletter, parkerworth.com. You can follow me on X. It's like my last name, Worth underscore Parker, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and it's just at Parker Worth. But yeah, otherwise, Greg, dude, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun, and dude, look forward to working together and talking.
Absolutely, man. Amazing advice. All the links will be in the description. Parker, thanks for coming on the show, brother.
Yeah, thank you too, man. It was fun.